I'm going to first announce Pam Samako, CEO, Green Training Associates, LLC. Pam is a trusted advisor for our clients' talent development priorities to drive sustainable performance, business confidence, and exceptional performance are outcomes of developing the right capabilities. She has proven success as a strategic leader in complex training and talent strategies, sustainability curriculum, leadership and workforce capabilities, organizational effectiveness, culture shift and transformation. Pam collaborates with clients to architect talent solutions that identify and close performance gaps. She is an accomplished business owner with a prior corporate career with Citicorp, American Express, Alcatel-Lucent, and Medco Health Solutions. So she'll be speaking in a few minutes, but I'm handing it off directly to Jason Klawinski. He's the principal of Green Building Center, LLC. Jason focuses on three areas: green architecture, consulting, and education. He is a sustainability ACE. He's an architect. Jason's work includes the restoration and adaptive reuse renovation of existing buildings, as well as new and environmentally responsible, healthy buildings for 20 years. He's also a consultant. Jason has assisted clients across multiple markets in achieving dozens of LEED certifications. He's also an educator. He's a lead faculty climate reality leader and G-Pro instructor. He teaches green curriculum for K-12, higher education, and professional development levels. So I want to thank you both for presenting. And Jason, I hand it on off to you for the rest of the meeting.
Thank you very much for having us. Happy Earth Day, everyone. It's great to be here. Pam, you can go ahead and pull up our presentation. So as Kevin said, my background is in architecture. Professionally, that's what I've been doing for the last few decades of my life, and my focus has been entirely on sustainability and green building. And I've had the opportunity to work on a number of different kinds of projects, residential, commercial, hospitality, corporate, K-12, higher ed over my career. And so I've been able to apply the LEED rating system to many, many different types of buildings, whether the projects are getting certified or not. And so our topic today, Green Buildings Need Green People, I thought was particularly interesting in combining what pain points facility managers have quite often with how that impacts the human aspect of buildings and why we build buildings in the first place.
Jason, thank you very much, and Kevin and the IFMI board and Israel for welcoming us to your meeting tonight. We're also appreciative of our sponsors that have shared their businesses with us. So we're super excited to present this Green Buildings Need Green People. And I've spent my entire career for 35 years in talent development, which is helping people perform differently and grow and thrive in their organizations. And so I currently work with clients that are in 4 industries. Basically, I focus on the verticals that develop people's capabilities to address the world's challenges in building sustainable organizations. So I do projects like change management for executives of environmental companies. I'm working with a telehealth client, doing some middle manager training, leadership training, and other types of coaching and programs that serve the people strategy, as well as the greening the people strategy, which is what brought us to this topic tonight. So I want to wish everyone a happy Earth Week. Today is perfectly timed to celebrate Earth Day every day and restore the planet theme. And we're going to help you create a more sustainable workplace with healthy, productive people in healthy buildings. And we're marrying the idea because we think that people would benefit from understanding the occupancy of a green building and also from the relationship that needs to be built between FMs and HRMs. So we're bringing to life this need for connection, communication, and collaboration of the FMs and the HRMs that serves improved planning, implementation, and operations for building upgrades and normal daily activities. So who's ready to get started? So we're ensuring occupant well-being while reduce environmental impact and increasing productivity. These are more important now than ever. And you might be planning this renovation, a new building, or looking at maintaining your existing building. Well, today's program is going to give you best practices and collaboration ideas that will help you create a strategy for your role in environmental stewardship and leadership. And our goal is to help you and your stakeholder engagement and your coordination and communication with your human resources function. And the conversation we're going to have will explore key areas like leadership through policy, smart design, operations, and cultivation of employee and HR relationships. We also want to get employees excited, engaged, and educated about your green building features that will help everyone maintain a healthy and sustainable workplace. So let's take a spin through our agenda. We've got a value-packed program for you. So please use the chat window generously for questions and comments. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat as well for some networking, and there'll be some networking time later today. And we're going to have some interactivity planned with some let's chat slides, and we'll have some polling questions. We also invite your questions throughout the program. Jason and I will be monitoring the chat as we go so we can make this an interactive conversation. So as we flow from the agenda, we've got a logical flow where we're going to start with a definition of sustainability to get everyone on the same page, why it's important, and the ideal green building approach, and some startling statistics and costs that you'll learn along the way about what happens when we don't make our way toward a more sustainable future. I'm going to jump in at a couple points to explain the human side of sustainability and why green buildings need green people. Then we're going to flow into a business case, which is where the combination comes in, where we both wrote our top 10 wish list for each other's function. So this was an interesting exercise. We plan to role model an interactive conversation through using a case study that's very relevant, that will demonstrate the best practices where we partner on design, implementation, and operation. And we'll close, and there'll be some time for networking and any remaining questions. So that's the plan for today. So allow me to introduce our first polling question. We've got, what is your role? So nice. We were very hopeful that you'd bring your HR professionals with you, but this will be recorded, obviously, and we can certainly share with you a takeaway handout that we're going to send over to Joanne to get out to the registered participants today. So love to see sustainability leaders, project managers. We've got some great folks in the room. So let's proceed with our next question. This is a chat for you also. What are you curious to learn about? So we're excited. What brought you out today? What was it about the topic, and or what your business priorities are that can guide us on your needs for today's learning experience? So continue on in the chat. And I'd like to be able to transition to Jason to talk more about the sustainability and the big picture about why it's important, some shocking statistics on the environmental impact of buildings. So
Thanks.
As folks chat, I will pull up the next slide, and Jason, take it away.
Thank you. So what is sustainability? One of the things that I learned in practicing architecture and green building is that sustainability is more than just a trend. It's a mega trend. And I don't know if anybody knows what a mega trend is. I had to go look it up because I was not really sure. But it's something that actually impacts every aspect of your life: business, social, environmental. And this article that I pulled out here, Harvard Business Review, which is actually, just over a decade old now, compared sustainability to two other megatrends of our lifetime: the Industrial Revolution and the Technological Revolution. And I think that they're spot on, because if you think about the impact of the Industrial Revolution and what it meant to society, and you think about the impact of the Technological Revolution and what it's meant to society, the Sustainable Revolution, which is what we are in all right now, is having the same impact. When you start to look at what's going on politically, socially, and environmentally as a result of this idea of needing a more sustainable culture, you can understand why this article puts sustainability on the same level as the Industrial Revolution and the Technological Revolution. So if you haven't looked at this article, the link is there. You'll have this in follow-up. I highly recommend you read this because it is very insightful. Go ahead. So when we think about sustainability, don't click yet. Don't click this yet. What I want to ask you all is, if everyone lived like we did here in the United States, how many planets would we need? Take a guess. Is one enough? or are there more? What do you guys think? Couple of them I see. 3. Go ahead and click it, Pam. 5. We would need 5. And obviously, this is not a sustainable way to be. So facility managers, as I see them, are in a very unique position to make recommendations and help make decisions to curb this appetite of consumption in buildings. Go ahead to the next slide. And we know the environmental impact of buildings. This information is from the U.S. Green Building Council. And what this shows you is that buildings are responsible for approximately 40% of all the greenhouse gas emissions in this country, which are directly responsible for the effects of climate change. And if you look at the electricity consumption, there is basically a 2-to-1 ratio in terms of electricity consumption in buildings and the amount of CO2 emitted. And that holds pretty well true for most of the United States, depending on the mix of fuel sources in the utility grid. And the scary fact is the amount of CO2 that we're emitting right now is astronomical. More CO2 is being released now than in the last 66 million years. The last time we saw something like this was the great extinction of dinosaurs. So the impact of climate change and the urgency of dealing with climate change and the role of buildings in climate change cannot be understated. You may think, I'm managing one building. What can one building do in terms of making a difference? One building here, one building there, stitch them all together, and now you've got a community. And that community grows to a region. That region grows to a state, to a country. So what you do in your individual buildings absolutely says something to everybody in those buildings. When they leave, you've made an impression on them that they take with them to other buildings. So I encourage you to understand that, yes, you may be in a single building or in a portfolio of buildings, but the impact and the urgency of dealing with this issue of CO2 emissions because of climate change impacts is critical. Go ahead to the next one.
Jason, let me jump in. Lacey has a quick question about having you repeat the statistic. If humans continue to live as is, today we would need 5 planets. Would you reinforce that point as we proceed?
Sure. If we, like I said, if everyone continues to consume resources like we do here in the United States, we would need 5 planets to meet that need. So think about places like China, India, the Philippines that are less developed than we are. If they all lived like we did, we could not support it with the resources on this planet.
Great, thank you. All right.
And how much climate change is too much? Now, the interesting problem that this presents for facility managers is climate change impacts the operation of buildings. What this chart is showing you, and this is from Architecture 2030, is that in the year 2050, thereabouts, it's expected that New Jersey will have the climate of Georgia because of climate change. What does that do to the way that we heat and cool our buildings? Current buildings in New Jersey are not designed for Georgia climate. It is a much more humid climate. This completely changes the kind of systems we need and the way we manage our buildings. So when you think about the impact on climate change, you think, oh, this is a big issue. It can't possibly affect me personally. Yes, it can affect you personally. And yes, it will affect how you operate the buildings that you are responsible for. Go ahead. And what you're seeing here is a very clear pattern. There's a lot of data about what's been happening over the last 4 to 5 decades with our patterns of weather. You see here floods, temperature droughts, extreme temperatures, droughts, fires, and storms, all on the increase. All of these are tangible effects of more CO2 in the atmosphere and all of the various impacts that has on things like more extreme storm events, heavier downpours that cause flooding, large droughts in between those downpours that then cause issues with mudslides in areas. And when you have droughts, you have potential for fires. So The scary thing about climate change to me isn't something like sea level rise. And yes, that's another potential issue that I'm going to talk about in a minute. The scary thing about climate change to me is this domino effect that it has across all the systems that we rely on for survival. Clean water, food, air. Go ahead. So what's the real cost? I deal as an architect with the idea of cost all the time. If I want to do a green project, an energy efficiency project, a healthy project, one of the first questions I'm asked is how much is that going to cost? And is there a return on my investment if there is a cost or a premium? Most of you are managing existing buildings, so there's no such thing as a construction budget. You're dealing with operating budgets for the most part, so there's always a cost. But what's the cost of not dealing with climate change? If you look at this map, what it's showing you here is the potential flood areas as a result of sea level rise. The areas that are in blue and red are expected to be underwater in our lifetimes, not stoppable. This is the Titanic. It's not quick and easy to turn. If we don't start turning it now, we're going to hit the iceberg that we can't undo. Everything that you see that's in brown is business as usual. And if any of you have properties around the coast of New Jersey, you can see that that starts to become a real problem. My office happens to be in Lambertville, New Jersey. So if you follow that green line between Pennsylvania and New Jersey on up, I'm right at the innermost point of that line. And the Delaware River happens to be tidal. So my little office here in Lambertville, New Jersey is not immune from rising sea level rises. Everything that is in green is worst case scenario. That is the drill baby drill scenario, which hopefully we will not see that come to fruition. But this is some of the potential impacts of sea level rise. Can you get insurance for buildings that are in these locations? Well, in some places you can. What's the cost of insurance related to this? What's the cost of repairing the buildings as a result of this kind of damage? These are some of the things you have to think about when we talk about the idea of cost. Go ahead. And speaking of sea level rise, when you look at the potential for this and you look at the 10 cities at risk from sea level rise by 2070, look at the third one. The New York, Newark metro area is number 3 on the list in terms of assets at risk. And so if you are anywhere in that metro area, you're potentially vulnerable just to this one aspect of sea level rise from climate change. Go ahead.
And Jason, there's a project right now in Lower Manhattan around the resiliency for that area where they're going to redo that Riverside Park, right? Which is in Lower Manhattan. It's the great risk for the sea level issue as well.
Yeah, and they're talking about seawalls, and
Yes.
I'm not convinced that that's going to work, but you know, you can see the issues that this raises with where your property is and the impacts this can cause.
They seem to want to create a platform and raise the whole park and the building structures up. I don't know how much, but it seems to have been approved, and they're going to close the park for several years. So that's a really real example of what's happening immediately that is of urgency for the rising sea level.
Yeah. And again, this is just one aspect of the impacts of climate change. So that gives you the sort of short rundown on, you know, the concept of sustainability and the impact of climate change. You know, what makes a building sustainable? It's a building that provides the healthiest environment possible, that is the most environmentally responsible that it can be, and does so in an economically viable way. That really, to me, is what a sustainable building is all about doing. Pam, why don't you take it with this?
Sure. Well, our next segment is to talk about the ideal green building approach toward a more sustainable future. And the healthy people, healthy places, healthy economy are essential. So we'd like to just check in with everyone on this polling question. Give us a quick chat on what your green building knowledge or experience is, so that we can calibrate what you know, whether you understand LEED, well, energy, and other. So just give us a quick chat and let us know what you know about green buildings, and give us a sense that we're speaking with a crowd that is anxious to get more information, as we have quite a bit coming. So,
and if you're other, tell us what the other is.
So Mark, you put other as one of our sponsors there. Happy to know what other means. And Lacey, great. You've got lead and energy. Good.
The IFMA SFP is a new certification that's come out for professionals. That's great to see.
Cool.
Well, currently studying. Yeah, well is a lot different than lead.
Good.
1, 2, and 3. We got an expert here with Joe.
Excellent, Joe. Bring it. Good. Thanks for sharing, folks. So, Jason, do you want to take us through who the normal stakeholders are? And this is, I think, a new building, right? And then you're going to talk about existing building stakeholders separately.
Yeah. So, as an architect, I have the fun of working on new ground up buildings and also renovations, additions, and modifications of existing buildings. And for the first, 10 years of my career, I never did a new building. Everything was reusing, renovating, upgrading existing buildings. And the stakeholder groups are a little different. And so one of the things we wanted to talk about today is who should you be thinking about including in your circle when you're talking about improving the sustainability of your building. This stakeholder group is really designed for new construction. So if any of you are lucky enough to be involved in a new build, design, concept, planning, this is the sort of stakeholder group that I would want to see at the table to really have everyone's input. So you've got your facilities and ownership group on sort of the top right-hand corner there. You've got your construction team, and yes, I want the construction team as part of the design process, not after the fact. And then you've got your consultants on the other side of the table there, and some specialty consultants that you'll see on projects like lead projects, commissioning authority, energy modelers, daylight modeling, which provide more valuable input. Now that group changes when you start to talk about existing buildings. So the existing buildings, you've got an existing team that you've got to work with, and that team can include the building engineer, security, the occupants, the owner of the building, groundskeeping, your IT folks, your facility management team. You may have a separate property management team depending on the grounds. And then you've got your executive leadership, your finance group, your design team, your HR department, which is one of the groups we're focusing on with this conversation. Insurance may be part of the conversation, purchasing, vendors. So it's a completely different group of stakeholders that you may be talking about for doing a sustainability project in an existing building versus new construction. And what I find more than often than not, when we work on a lead for existing building project, for example, is that these people don't always talk all the time. And they all hold different pools of information in the worlds that they manage and control. And so lead for existing buildings helps facilitate communication in order to get a certification. So we're focusing on the HR team and the FM team today, and many of these may be in the peripherals of those. But this is a group of stakeholders that you have to think about when you're approaching a sustainability project, and you might find that some of your biggest allies are people that you didn't think about talking with before, like HR.
It's critical because this is about your leadership as an environmental steward of your building, and having all the right people at the table is changing. And one of the most important people now is finance executives are having a big seat at the sustainability roundtable due to the role of finances and metrics and transparency and what goes public. So it's encouraging that we're taking a big picture of sustainability and stakeholders in today's meeting.
So you can keep flicking through this. So really defining what green buildings are and everything that they do, there's quite a lot to it. So, a green building, as I mentioned, it will conserve natural resources. It will create a healthy indoor environment for its occupants. It will reduce operating costs, and it will help eliminate environmental impacts such as greenhouse gas emissions. And when you look at all the things that touches, water consumption, land consumption, raw materials, energy use, controllability, ventilation systems, finishes in the building, designing the building for daylighting and views, maintenance. All of these things are part of what a green building is. And the confusing thing about green buildings is there's no silver bullet. And one existing building is not like another existing building, even in the same portfolio in the same company. So a lot of people want to know, well, what do I do to make my building green? Can you give me the cheat sheet? Well, the answer is no, because what I would do for one building may be different than what I did for the building next door, depending on the age, condition, and systems of that building. So the buildings really need to look at all these different aspects. You may be stronger in one area than others, and that's where you can improve.
So the uniqueness is important, and I would anticipate what the goal is to evolve the building over time and probably budget as part of that process of negotiating with stakeholders, right?
Yep, absolutely. And the stakeholders, like I mentioned before, are key. So the one thing that I can tell you is that there is a process that you can go through, which is consistent. And if you follow this process, you will get the best results that I think you can. This is a process that LEED laid out long ago when it created LEED for existing buildings, and that I have used for decades since then. So the first step here is to assess your current building. Benchmark it, basically. How are you doing in energy, water, waste, green cleaning, pest control, a whole host of things that you would benchmark against for a LEED, potential LEED certification, but sustainability in general. Once you've benchmarked your building, what are the goals? What do you want to achieve? How far do you want to go in any of those areas or all of them? And then step 3, developing a plan of action to reach those goals. Step 4, actually implementing and measuring the success of that implementation. And step 5, learn and educate, because buildings and people are continually learning, and a building can teach you what to do. It can also teach you what not to do. Go ahead.
Okay, so following question, give us a chat. Do you currently use Well Building Standard and Well Portfolio Program? I think we saw a couple of folks that said they had Well in their backgrounds. So standard only, portfolio, both, neither, thinking about it, you're not sure. So give us a quick chat with where you're at with the Well Building approach.
And for those of you who don't know what WELL is, it is a spin-off of the LEED rating system. It's a separate rating system, and it basically took the indoor environmental quality category of LEED and blew it up into its own rating system. It was created in New York City by a developer, believe it or not, for high-end residential. It's now an international system. The Green Building Certification Institute has taken over the management of the WELL Building Standard, and WELL is focused on health and wellness, as the name would imply, whereas LEED focuses heavily on environmental impact and on some health aspects. WELL focuses heavily on the impact of buildings on human health first.
All right, so we've got some answers in the chat. Neither, thinking about it, some don't know. Good. Okay.
And WELL is still relatively new in the grand scheme of things, so I'm not surprised that it's less known and less updated.
So that's great advice, because that continues the story about how to evolve the combination of green buildings and green people. And so I love the chat, and the people are really engaged. I'm glad to see our continuous conversation. So Jason's given us a big picture about defining sustainability, the importance of the urgent actions due to increasing impacts of climate change. Here I'm going to be sharing with you 3 roadmaps with approaches for the whole company, human resources, and a company culture model. So people are the common denominator across all problems and all solutions for the current state and future state of our planet. What it simply boils down to is that human behavior has to change in order for us to get out the other side of the 5 planets that Jason's mentioned earlier, because that's mission critical. And it's up to us as you know, global occupants, or if you will, to take care of the planet. So we're encouraging you to take action, as we need a tidal wave of change that will help us affect sustainable, positive impact on our global challenges. And this tidal wave of change has to happen in every corner, every sector, industry, organization, household, and individual. So in the broadest sense of sustainability, people are how your organization thrives. And we get asked to define sustainability a lot. And the simple answer is it's all encompassing, which is why when Jason talked about the building process, each individual building is unique to its own needs, and how to arrive at a green building is a process. And I think that what you're starting to see is this process will also happen from an organizational level and a corporate strategy, because sustainability can be applied to almost anything in life. But particularly, sustainable organizations are broadly defined to mean that they balance their business strategy with their people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnerships, and they use a systemic approach. And we focus on short and long-term goals within and around the company's ecosystem. So human behavior change is at the heartbeat and the drumbeat of innovation. And our path to a sustainable future basically is arrived at by a classic Albert Einstein quote that says, we can't solve problems with the same thinking that created them. So let's take a closer look at the people strategies that you can use to create this tidal wave of change. So let's look at the whole company approach first. So what you'll see is your company can operate at 5 levels of sustainable company. And we're going to start at the bottom of this pyramid, where employees will have a personal lifestyle that's green. And we all bring ourselves to work every day. So if we can have personal green and sustainable habits at home, we can certainly learn those at the job. We can have a green workplace, which has everything to do with your green building strategy that you heard from Jason around recycling, motion sensors, local food sources, energy efficiencies, etc. Then your company actually can produce green goods and services. And that's at the level of like a green dry clean, organic or natural foods, green friendly products and services. And when we start to build this, your company can produce those goods and services using sustainable methods, cradle to cradle strategy, which is circular economy, green supply chain, green manufacturing, life cycle analyses. So there's some really cool stuff in sustainable methods that we see. And you're starting to see Amazon, for example, is a great example where they're using electric vehicles, they're purchasing carbon offsets and other zero emission strategies by 2040. And they're having commercials that are telling the public what is about their sustainability brand that's helping offset the impact of what is a carbon intensive company, basically with their logistics and package deliveries and so forth. And at the top, you can see the societal contribution, where those sustainable methods, goals, and services contribute to the society at large, where there's donations, charitable contributions, voluntary causes, where the industry and the company uses their strengths to dedicate to improving society at large. So you see Bomba socks, they basically are doing for every one pair of socks that they sell, they're donating a pair of socks. So that's an example of corporate social responsibility and societal contribution. So it's easy to see in this chart where facilities managers contribute to green buildings, workplaces, and employee health and productivity and well-being. So when we look at this, you can operate from the basics of compliance in your model to meeting the regulatory requirements. Then you build up to integration, where you have some green components in your company, or you're going to a full transformation, which is basically when your business model gets matured over time to a fully sustainable model. So let's look at the human resources sustainable workplaces roadmap next. Let me invite your consideration. Many companies will ask a very common question. Well, how can human resources contribute to a company's sustainability goals? I get this question all the time, like, what does Green Training Associates do and why are you involved in sustainability? Well, you heard from Jason, he's the technical guy around green buildings and green education. I'm on the people side of the strategy. And the question essentially is, if a company is only thinking about its sustainability in terms of technology, technical trends, production, scientific, environmental, engineering approach, you're missing the opportunity to engage with the entire workforce within the organization. And so human resources does play an integral role. In fact, the entire HR strategy can become green in its practices and contributions to the company's goal. And it's not only corporate social responsibility that we have a role, but it's the entire HR ecosystem. So this roadmap provides it's an approach to mainstreaming your company's sustainability commitment. Well, what's the business case? Well, first of all, we can't run a business on a dead planet. So companies and CEOs have made climate action a priority, and sustainability is really thriving and engaged. If every company is not thinking about it, your competitors are. So this is an essential opportunity where we're prioritizing green and climate issues, as Jason mentioned. After the coronavirus sort of subsides and we get this pandemic under control, climate is on deck. In fact, it's a greater tidal wave of impact if we don't take hold of this now. But the pandemic has created some opportunities, and it is getting noticed because, you know, when you look at rising temperatures combined with the population growth in the world, meaning there's about 3 billion people, which is a third of the planet of 9 billion in projected growth with the third world countries, that could be living in an unlivable conditions by 2070. So when Jason talked about the planet and the rising sea level and the 5 planets of resources that we're using, we're also going to see the rising sea level take away what is the most livable, conditions. And we're going to have, a third of this planet by 2070, if we don't take action, that won't have a livable condition. So there's a driving urgency where companies now need to focus on sustainability. The conscious generation of the incoming millennials and Gen Zs, they're expecting to walk into a workplace that is a sustainable organization, where the environmental brand is there. Sustainability branding is evident in the recruiting strategy. It's embedded in the talent cycle. It's bringing in the capabilities of young professionals that have sustainability and environmental positioning in their background and experience, that they can help further the sustainability goals. It's aligning with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Is a whole framework over how to improve your strategy in all the major areas of sustainability pillars. So ideally, the general themes are that you're, connecting into your people, you're creating a leadership strategy, you're aligning your company culture and the workplace with the green building initiatives that also foster the view of working in a place that the company cares about health and well-being, and that employees are more productive and they're performing better, and they're also feeling very proud of being part of a company that has a sustainability position. You've got a report, you're showing metrics that demonstrate the impact that you're having. So there's some really good things happening, and I invite you to make consideration for an HR executive conversation. So let me move to our third roadmap. On the third and final roadmap is about the company culture model. And I'm going to invite you to look at these two side-by-side diagrams. And when you overlay them, we're looking at balanced, resilient, agile individuals and the optimal, balanced, sustainable organization. And the matching of the colored circles is intentional, because we can have maximum impact on professionals if we align the person's capturing people's minds for innovation, improving business results, driving change in the company, protecting people's health and planetary resources, creating a social call to action, if you will, around collective spirit, passion, and purpose, and embracing the diverse community and creating well-being and a company culture that's a nice place to work. So to summarize, we've looked at 3 roadmaps for a sustainable company, a sustainable workforce, and a sustainable culture. Next, let's take Jason and my overviews from what we've done so far today to the next level by combining green buildings and green people. We're going to talk about the business case and our wish lists for each other, and then we'll share a case study. So Jason, the business case for facility and HR managers to collaborate. Let's ask this big polling question. How many of you already partner with your FM or HRM? So do we have any ideas about how well you're doing with your counterparts in HM? Sometimes Israel. Okay, great, thanks. well, you might want to, but you don't know how, which is what's coming. So we're excited to share that case study with you that'll help you understand the way to go. Kathleen, great news that you've got some partnership going. Wonderful. We're hoping some ideas will spark some interest and help you take that to the next level. So the business case of our partnership and collaboration is a pretty strong one. And basically, we're inviting you to think about the lens of sustainability and being green, because you're going to see it everywhere. And business entities of all kinds can actually make these things happen. And so you're just basically seeing a summary of implementing sustainability practices that can easily save businesses and building money with a few simple steps. And then we start working toward a more integrated approach. So Jason, let me turn it to you to talk about the sustainability value proposition for green buildings.
Sure, thanks. So that list you had that you just went through pretty quickly had a lot of great points in it that we're going to expand on here, I think. But when we talk about implementing projects in existing buildings, the first challenge is budget, right? How do you get over the cost factor? Is there an ROI? And that really lives in that whole profitability sector of the triple bottom line, which is what you're seeing here. But what people don't talk about is the impact in terms of people often, and what is the cost implications of that, which I'm going to show you in a minute. And ultimately, what is the bigger picture cost by not doing things, as it may result in issues from climate change that I showed you earlier. So when you're trying to convince leadership to implement projects and improve the sustainability of your company, yes, you have to deal with the issue of first cost and return on investment, but you also need to look at the true cost of projects, which include people and include climate change mitigation and risk mitigation costs that aren't often factored into typical ROIs. Go ahead. So this is what many of you are used to seeing. This is traditional building operating costs over the 40-year life cycle of a building. This is, you see the 800-pound gorilla here is operation. The cost of alterations, the cost of financing, the cost of construction. My design fee as an architect is in that little sliver. That's about 6 to 8% when we're talking about new builds. But this is traditionally what facility managers are looking at and justifying doing sustainability projects, because they're going to shave money off of that operational cost item, which is half of the cost of ownership of a building. If I can cut a quarter of that, or even half of that if I'm lucky, then I can usually justify a project on first cost and payback scenarios from a pure dollar and cent standpoint. But this doesn't take into account people. Now, keep this chart in mind, and let's go to the next slide. The next slide here shows you the impact of people, the cost of people. If you talk to the owners of the company and you ask them what their biggest operating expense is for the business, they will most likely tell you it's people. That chart that I just showed you fits in that little gray area. It's only about 8% of the total cost of operating a business. So when you're implementing projects for sustainability as a facility manager that say improve air quality, and improve daylighting and reduce toxicity and improve green cleaning, all which result in higher productivity or better attendance, less absenteeism, less sick days, you're actually having a bigger impact on the biggest cost, people, than you are in the dollars and cents of energy savings per se. Both are important, but when you really understand this idea of cost, people head and shoulders are the biggest cost in buildings today. And so when you're thinking about justifying a project to leadership, you should not get trapped in justifying it based just on, well, what's the dollar and cent energy payback? You have to look at these other impacts on people. And this is where you need to talk to HR. HR folks will be able to tell you, improved productivity means this in terms of return on investment for people. Those are the kinds of dollars and cents that most facility managers don't have the expertise or the background to pull out. But your HR counterpart can help you really document this and add this into your ROI. So a project that may have looked like it took 14 years to pay back might actually pay back in 2. Go ahead.
So to put a big wrap around, the FMs and HRM partnerships is critical for leadership, partnership, and collaboration toward a sustainable workplace. And we invite you to consider connection plus communication plus collaboration, which will equal the optimal outcomes. So let me invite you to chat again. What benefits can you add to our business case for the FM and HRM collaboration?
That you've seen and that maybe you've experienced on your projects.
Yeah, exactly. How can you share and help others with something that's worked for you?
And why don't we go on to the next slide while folks are chatting that in.
Great. So let me turn it to you, Jason. Let's talk about your wish list for HR managers. What are the 10 reasons to talk with us?
All right. Not in David Letterman format, but just as in stream of consciousness format. So here are some things that come to mind. You know, I'm not a facility manager, but as an architect, I've dealt with many facility managers, both in new and existing buildings. And these are the things that the facility managers, in some cases, have asked, and in some cases that I wish they asked in order to get the best results, as Pam was just talking about. So first and foremost, understanding the building impact on health and wellness. As I was just saying, when you looked at that prior chart I showed, people are the most expensive thing in buildings and the most overlooked when we talk about return on investment. Developing an effective business case study beyond energy savings to budget and implement projects. So yes, you know, energy savings are something easy and tangible and more easily measurable, but these other impacts on human health and wellness are also tangible and measurable. Identifying chemical sensitivities and allergies to staff. If you're going to do a renovation project and you're introducing products that may or may not cause problems, this is something that you should know about the people in your building. And as a facility manager, you may not, but HR probably does. Sharing data on purchasing of supplies. In a lead for existing building, they look at what you're purchasing to use in the building on a daily basis, as well as the waste coming out of the building. Not every facility manager controls the sort of day-to-day purchases, paper, toner, cartridges, all those sorts of things that get used up in a building quickly. Are the hours of operation and staff levels in the building still correct? Now with COVID, obviously we have had a drastic change in hours of operation and staffing. What is that going to look like coming back? And how do you have to plan for that and operating your systems most effectively? I'm sure that there are going to be times when the systems can be turned down or turned off that they didn't or couldn't be before. So there are some opportunities here in how you manage your buildings. Go ahead. Coordinating activities like pest treatment. You know, you don't really think about it, but a lot of people are allergic to the kinds of things you might use to treat pests. This is a very simple thing, but it's also can be complicated with chemical sensitivity. High visibility item here is improving air quality, obviously for the reasons that we're all in. Filtration, ventilation are all things to look at. Can your existing building be improved? And if so, how? And what are the impacts that they may have on your human resource side of things? Green cleaning. We are all cleaning more as a result of what's happened. What are you cleaning with? You know, slathering Clorox across your building is potentially just as toxic as other things that we want to try to avoid. Communicating sustainability goals. What is it that we're trying to accomplish? And again, back to that group of stakeholders. Does everybody understand the full impacts across all the stakeholders that there are potentially there? And last but not least, related to this, getting buy-in and participation. People who you least expect it might be your biggest allies when they realize that there is an impact on their side of the equation. So if you're trying to convince your leadership to implement certain projects and you've only thought about energy, but not human impact, there's an opportunity there to pull HR in and make them your ally. Go ahead.
Well, thanks for your wish list. So I formed my own wish list and the 10 reasons to talk with HR. Here's what my perspective as an HR executive would be for y'all to engage with us. So, you know, top 10 format, as we know, we invite you to create a cross-department task force. I think this is essential to coordinate the design, operation, and implementation. We want to be able to review facility changes in advance And this stakeholder group would be part of your cross-functional or cross-department task force that would then outline the facility changes, and just a coordination of planning the work and working the plan together, I think, is essential. We invite you to talk with us about coordinating an employee survey on facility needs. I'm a sensitive person, so like Jason spoke about, like things to be careful of and sensitivities and air quality. I'm all about that stuff for myself, and I know that it's essential for our employees' well-being on the facility needs, and the changes that are being made and what their impact is, and the communication to the employees is essential. So communicating facility plans to avoid surprises to employees and avoid clashes of business activities. So in my corporate career, I've worked in a lot of corporate buildings, and I've had experiences where get a message from facilities that was like out of the blue and didn't make any sense or didn't connect the dots for me as an employee. Or it overlapped, or it seemed to be, time out of the building, or some other issues that were not making sense with regard to the overall business strategy and the plans. So we can avoid complaints basically at that point with human resources guidance into your plan. We would reduce the employee complaints that would come out of something that may have been unexpected, or a communication that didn't get cleared, so that we can make sure that it's lined up with some other things. So I want you to think about HR as an umbrella function, if you will, and we knit together the organization. So we can have a fair amount of impact and add to your strategy and enhance it to make sure that it gets executed well. So in moving on to our human resources wish list, plan joint communication announcements that help us consider employee impact and offer a clear action plan is basically an opportunity on the planning side. I love the idea to describe green building capabilities and benefits to help include in our recruiting brochures, CSR, branding, marketing efforts. And employee engagement is critical. Think about the multiplier effect when you can have all the employees that understand what the green building is and what the benefits are. And giving a green building tour to new employees so they can understand what the building is about, what's special about it, what's unique, and what metrics are involved, and how the business is doing the right thing for carbon emissions. And I love to train occupants on ideal habits to maintain the green building's operational efficiency and effectiveness. So I think it's a critical area where the more employees understand how the building operates differently and what they could do to enhance it, people feel proud of that. And it's part of a culture shift and a mindset that you have this opportunity. And of course, coordinating a metrics dashboard for green building elements to connect to employee wellness and well-being indicators with your lead and or well-building standards or portfolio programs. So there's a direct line into the corporate sustainability report, a CSR report, metrics dashboard, and of course, the finance and the transparency over what you're doing and why you're doing it. So ultimately, when you look at the summary of greening the human experience factors, there's so many great benefits here around satisfaction, happiness, productivity, green employee onboarding, building orientation, branding, recruiting, engagement, training, and building occupancy and enjoyment of a green workspace. So I'm pleased to invite you to consider what facility and HR challenges you've encountered and how Jason and I can help as we move into the best practices in our case study that will illustrate the way to work, the way we can work together more effectively. So let me invite you to chat. Tell us what challenges you've got and how we can help as we step into the case study to proceed. Jason, go ahead.
Thanks. So go ahead to the next slide. So one of the case study I want to talk about today was with Harts Mountain Industries located in Secaucus. They have a 250,000 square foot corporate headquarters building, which is sort of your classic 90s pancake looking modern style building. It was a goal for them to achieve a LEED Silver for existing building certification on this building. And they really wanted to create a best practices and a roadmap of how to do this and then how to continue operating sustainably going forward. And that's what we were engaged to help them do. We've done this with a number of clients. Go ahead. And so, what we look at is designing or creating, the plan to implement once we've assessed the building and established our goals. What is that plan? And that picks up here, implementation, and ultimately continuing to operate effectively. So ultimately, the Harts Mountain project did achieve a LEED Silver certification for existing buildings. We did do a benchmarking exercise and looked at what they were doing well, what they weren't doing well, and identified the gap to get to the goal of LEED Silver for existing buildings. And then ultimately, who were the stakeholders that we had to engage? Who had the data and the information that we needed? And how could we create a data roadmap so that after we were done with this project, that this group continued to talk and measure the performance of the building, and ultimately continue to report out those results not only to the tenants and the owner, but also potentially to the public. Go ahead. So, in program design, when it comes to this is the kind of thing that we looked about. We looked at, first of all, the basic building data: energy use, water use, waste output, and costs associated with those things. We looked at the sustainable policies that they may have or have not had. And if you're not familiar with LEED for existing buildings, it is very policy heavy. It is very operational policy focused and implementing those policies successfully. So things like a commuting policy, which is now really important with the situation we're in. Groundskeeping, pest management, green cleaning, also important with the current situation. Recycling and purchasing, and then any other miscellaneous items that may be touched on as part of a certification like LEED. And Pam, from your side, I know you've got input here.
Of course. So when a program is being designed, it's a really great opportunity for us to open the conversation over what's being planned, and have HR as part of the planning meetings in this cross-functional task effort, administering the employee survey if needed to collect information around commuting. Certainly things are changing around hours of operation and staff being on site because there's so much remote workforce happening. But there might be overtime or after hours. You have some essential workers that are on site depending on the job and the criticality. You have some workers that can do 100% remote, but then you have some that have to be 100% on site. So for building facility managers, it's good to know who those essential workers are and that they're taking the precautions for COVID at this point, and that there's the sanitization, as well as the fact that they are protected, that there might be HR temperature checks. OSHA is very involved at this point with regard to the standards for people to be on site and protecting the health of employees that do have to go to the job every day. There's hybrid work schedules, staggered schedules. Some people have some companies have their policy to bring their kids or pets to work, and there's protocols for that, and understanding the staff supply needs, chemical sensitivities, assessing risk, and COVID, et cetera. So we've got a couple of chat, Jason, but I wonder if we address the chat at the end of the case study to flow through. How would you like to handle those?
Well, the one thing the chat I see here from Carol is, they're having a hard time getting HR to focus on anything but COVID. And while we're not talking about COVID in your face today, we are talking about issues that impact something like COVID quite a bit, with things like the ability to telecommute, which was a sustainable approach long before COVID. It just happens to be a necessity now. Things like, green cleaning, which we should have been thinking about before COVID anyway, but now we are cleaning at such a high level that you really need to think about green cleaning. So actually, there are things around sustainability in this presentation that you should be talking to HR about because of COVID. The reaction to something like COVID, okay, we're going to clean more than we ever have. What are you cleaning with? What are the chemicals you're introducing in the building? Okay, we need better ventilation. Well, you needed better ventilation before, quite frankly, and people were probably complaining about it, but you didn't do anything about it because there weren't enough complaints, or there wasn't enough budget, there was something else to focus on. So a lot of what we're talking about today is directly related to dealing with and mitigating risks from things like COVID even though we're not so in your face that this is COVID only. We should have been, and we should be doing these things anyway. And if buildings are embracing these ideas and strategies, you are better prepared to deal with situations like COVID when they do arise.
I agree, and I'll add my thoughts as well, Jason, to the Carol's question. The HR executives that I've been in conversations with are planning a return to work date, and
Yes.
facility managers should be participating in the decision and the safety by which you're bringing those workers, the HEPA filters that are critical. I would invite you to consider, HR is looking at, do you take temperature checks? Are you tracking from a HIPAA perspective, vaccinations and testing, and making sure that when they're signing in that they've got their, there's a temperature check at the door. And the other opportunities for you to consider: the sanitation, the HEPA filtration, the safety standards, the extra hand sanitizing stations. And I mean, there's so many things. And I know return to work conversations are happening as we speak, and HR is looking to bring the workforce back. I'm hearing a lot in the fall. I'm hearing kind of a Q3 timeframe. So right now, in the next few weeks, is a perfect opportunity to decide about supplies, testing, temperature, and all the other variables that ensure that the workplace is clean and ready to receive the workers, and that it's in a maintenance mode as you have some people back on site. So I'm excited because I think it's a good plan for you to, Carol, to get the conversation going.
Let's keep moving.
Yep, exactly.
So this is just one example, and you may not think of this as something that you would engage both the HR side and the facility manager side. In this particular example with Harts Mountain, we looked at their grounds and how to green the grounds around the building. You can see in the photo at the bottom that this is sort of your classic 90s office park type environment. It's a building with a little island of grass all the way around it, surrounded by road, and this is basically the footprint of this development. And one of the things that we wanted to do was to eliminate water consumption for irrigation of their lawns, and also change the plantings to native plants. So what our friend Mark was talking about at GSA about native plants and bringing native plants back into locations is one of the focuses of LEDB. And so we said, what are you spending to water the lawn, cut the grass, and replant all the dead flowers? And by the way, how do people feel about the way that looks? And they didn't know what they were spending because they subbed this out to a third-party vendor. So the people in the room didn't have the answer I wanted. And I said, look, go find out what this costs you, because I want to be able to compare the true cost of this to the cost of removing these invasive species and replanting with native plants, and look at the big picture: water consumption, labor costs, greenhouse gas emissions from all the lawnmowers and maintenance equipment, etc. Go ahead and click. So when they finally did this, they realized that the payback was 6 months, which they were shocked at by how much they were spending for all these different things together. Now, how does this fit to HR? Well, they went ahead with this project because suddenly the return on investment looks fantastic. They started to get unsolicited feedback from the tenants in the building about how much nicer the building was, about how much more they enjoyed coming to the building. Now, this is a building that the owner occupies only 50% of. The other 50% are tenants. So if you as a facility manager find yourself in this scenario, one of the things you have to think about in this environment is, how do you keep tenants? This is one way to do it, improving the building. And this relates to HR because they got involved in this.
So the enrichment of the environment makes the employees happy, and I'm glad to hear that. So let's just get a quick question from Joe for you, Jason.
We gotta move to.
Yeah, our rain gardens in the mix.
Rain gardens could be in the mix. There's certainly one solution. We didn't do rain gardens here, but we did do native plantings for their entire landscaped area. I know we're running short on time, so yep. In terms of implementation here, now that you've done these projects, how do you continue to track them? You need a tracking mechanism to continue tracking energy consumption, water consumption, waste, and how well you're doing at implementing these policies that have been put in place. And many of these policies need that multi-stakeholder group, including HR, in order to get them adopted and passed. This is not something that facility managers can do on their own.
Exactly. And HR continues to be by your side in implementation. So let's move to, as we have just a couple slides left to close our case study, to round it out with this. Go ahead, Jason.
So this is another image of the Harts Mountain building, and here's a very straight energy, energy issue. So we did an energy analysis of the building. They scored a 90 in Energy Star, which is really high. So they were operating the building effectively. We did a retro commissioning exercise because they wanted to improve their performance still, and we found that adding a BMS system to the building, I should say expanding the BMS, because the building had been renovated over time, different spaces were renovated. You probably, all the facility managers are groaning saying, yeah, that's happened to me. But there was nothing connecting all these different BMS projects that had happened. They decided to go ahead and implement an expanded BMS system. It saved them $35,000 the first year. The system cost 17. It's a no-brainer from an energy standpoint. But what it also did was allow them to better control ventilation. It allowed them to actually start to fix problems in the building where there wasn't adequate ventilation, there wasn't adequate temperature control, and all of that goes back to fewer complaints from HR as a result. So again, here's another project that from a straight energy standpoint looks good, but add in the HR factor and it looks even better. An ongoing operation, again, now that we've done this, you've got to have a method to continue monitoring implementation of the policies, collection of the data, regular meetings with that stakeholder group to continue, because you don't want the building to be green for a month and then go back to what you were doing before. You've got to have a mechanism and a practice in place to continue this with this group of stakeholders.
And the key message for HR is we want employees to make green decisions every day, and that's truly a program I teach. But understanding the value and the impact of the ongoing operation, policy impacts, monitoring regular meetings, communicating progress, doing a touch base is essential for this partnership to be effective.
And so I find lead and well together to be really optimal. They're complementary, they're a little bit of overlap, but well focuses on people, lead focuses on environment. If you do them together, even if you're not going for a certification, but as a planning tool, they can be very, very powerful to work with HR and facilities to get the best results. And in terms of the monitoring, what I will recommend to you all to look at, if you're not familiar with it, is ARC. It is a new real-time data tracking and monitoring platform that LEED has put out, which is meant to be used for many different things. Go to the next slide. Real-time monitoring of energy, water, waste, transportation, and this is the interesting one, human experience. We can put meters in building all day long to monitor energy and water, but how do you monitor human experience? How do you get that feedback from doing these other things? This platform is meant to be where the LEED certification and the WELL certification transition to. Instead of a static certification of a moment in time, this is ongoing, real-time reporting and certification. It's a dynamic certification system. So if you haven't seen ARC, you can enroll your buildings in ARC, even if you're not going for certifications, and use it to work towards greening your existing buildings.
So feel free to chat. What were the highlights of the case for you in the chat, and see if these ideas were helpful. We're opening it up for any questions and discussion as we're at the end of our program. So WELL program is run by whom, Jason? Is it the WELL Building Institute, right?
No, WELL is, well, the WELL Building Institute is like the U.S. Green Building Council. They are the ones who created the WELL program and update the requirements. But WELL is certified by the same group that certifies LEED, and that is the Green Business Certification Institute, GBCI.
Excellent. And I want to invite, I can respond. Israel had an earlier question that he hasn't had HR approach him concerning sustainability. How should that conversation start? Well, it's a great opportunity to approach them And if you need help, let me know, because sometimes HR may not be tuned into the things that I described today around culture, employee engagement, and other features around leadership, and connecting the sustainability strategy with HR's role is sometimes not on their radar screen, which is where I can give a hand. But I would say initially it's inviting them to a conversation to say you'd like them to be at the round table and to be a stakeholder at minimum in the facility discussion that we've shared with you today is essential. So let's see, Jason, is ARC a survey type of a system for measuring? Can you respond to Israel's question there?
Yeah, so for the energy, water, and waste, it can actually be automatically reported from meter data in the buildings. But for some things like commuting or cleanliness, those are indeed survey type things that need to get manually uploaded into ARC. So ARC tries to focus on things that can be collected more or less automatically, but the human experience factor does require human interaction to get that data and to report it.
Excellent. So we'll stick around as we'll close it formally. We're excited to hear what you felt were the key learnings for you, and certainly want to thank you for your participation today. Please keep in touch via social media. We love to connect on sustainability. And basically, who's with us to create a tidal wave of change to ensure green buildings have green people? Jason, what closing remarks might you add? And we'll stick around for questions and some networking time.
The last thought I'll leave you with is, COVID is the tree. It's not the forest. And it provides an opportunity, I think, and it has exposed weaknesses that have been in buildings for a long time. And if your HR director is distracted with COVID right now, just realize that they're looking at the tree. They're not looking at the forest. That's okay. They have to deal with it. They have to put that particular fire out to save that tree, but you need to help them back out and say, look, we are having these issues with things like ventilation and cleaning and sustainability practices long before COVID. COVID has just magnified some of these problems in our buildings. So let's use this as an opportunity to, as Biden said, build back better. How can we come back to our buildings in a better way, in a better environment, provide healthier spaces that are more environmentally responsible, and do it in a way that is more profitable for the business?
So there's so much value in healthy people, healthy places, healthy building, and a healthy economy. And we're excited to be here with you tonight. We're so gracious for IFMA to have hosted us, and to our sponsors. And thank you all for your participation. And we'll officially close today's meeting and invite back to the table anyone from IFMA that wants to host the networking. Joe, I love your comment. The planet is one big building needing cooperation with all the occupants. That's a tall order, but necessary. Carol, you're welcome. We're here for you. Feel free to reach out to me and Jason in any way we can help you get started with this discussion. We're here. Thank you.
So Pam, I like to say thank you to you and Jason for this great presentation here on behalf of the New Jersey chapter at IFMA. I'd like to thank you very much for this. Normally, I should say traditionally, at the end of these presentations, we usually open up this forum for anyone to just discuss anything. So it's kind of like our social hour. Jackie kind of runs it. She kind of leads that charge on that. And so at this time, the floor is yours there, Jackie.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, we'd love to hear your feedback, right, Pam and Jason? Like any thoughts you want to share, or comments, or experience?
I do want to mention one thing, Jackie, that it was the presentation was great because a lot of times FMs we put on our hat and we're more focused on our building and our folks, but there's obviously that partnership with HR. So Pam reminded us of that partnership, and that's a key component. I think I can definitely attest to it during COVID. I found that I've had more interactions with HR because of COVID. However, looking, forward into the future, the hope is that we will continue that conversation, not just on COVID, because really we want to put COVID to bed, and we want to start focusing on sustainability and in our environment, because hopefully those type of factors will improve our health. So hopefully it'll give us our immune systems the power to fight off, any future diseases or infections that are out there. So
yeah. Israel, is there any, because I'm seeing you're very large. It's not everyone on the screen. Is it just me?
Yeah, change your view.
Oh, okay. Now I'm in gallery. Okay, got it. I just heard a really interesting fact that it is now less expensive to prevent climate change than it is to fix the disasters of climate change, which, that couldn't have taken long. Jason, you want to reiterate on that at all, or?
Well, it's totally true. I mean, look at the cost of one storm like Sandy. $35 trillion to repair the damage, and Sandy is one of 8 such storms that we've had in the last decade. What would have been the cost to prevent that from happening in the first place versus paying to fix all the damage from those? I mean, it's a no-brainer. It would have been a fraction of the cost had we acted, 2 decades ago, potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, and another interesting fact I heard recently was on vampire electricity and how it costs. Yeah, and how it costs billions.
Yeah, so everybody that has stuff plugged in, like your computer, your cell phone charger, the adapters that you leave plugged in when you take those devices away, that little box is an inverter, and that little box is what we call a phantom load. It continues to draw power, even though your device isn't plugged in. So what I always tell people, and I drive my wife crazy doing this, is I walk around and I unplug all those things. And by the way, I
unplug too.
I live in a completely off-grid house that runs on solar. So now I am hypersensitive to this. I was bad before, but now I'm a madman when it comes to these loads. And what I've found in buildings is when you run the energy model for buildings, and we did this with TD Bank, we got TD Bank to a point that their buildings were so efficient that the biggest load in the building was plug loads. And there were things that they just couldn't unplug, which I understand, but there were a lot of things that they could unplug. And it was 40% of their energy consumption, plug loads. That's how good we got with the building envelope, the lighting, and the HVAC system, that plug loads were so big. So yeah, these phantom loads are real. If you've got a bunch of stuff plugged in and you just leave it plugged in, it is continuing to continuously draw power.
Yeah. Oh my God, my dad used to crack the whip.
One of the easiest ways to fix this in a commercial
Turn the
building,
lights out.
well, think about all the
when you leave the room.
think about all the workstations in your commercial buildings, right? How many things are plugged into a typical workstation? If you start to count them, it's about 10, right? Some things you can't turn off, like you don't want to turn your CPU off on your computer because that could damage the computer. But if you plug everything else into an occupancy sensor power strip, that is the way to fix your plug load problem low tech. For $25, go get an occupancy sensor power strip and plug all your non-essential items into that power strip.
Good to know.
Nice. That's,
if I may, on a single consumer side, after I retired last summer, I attacked my house and made it as efficiently as possible. Occupancy sensors, LED lighting, timers, undoing plug loads, and I reduced my home electric bill by 30%. Just doing that.
Low tech, right?
Over a 2-year period of average 30% loss in consumption. Yeah. I did that while I was working at the school, but I never thought about it. You know, the shoemaker always has holes in his shoes, you know, never takes care of that.
Exactly.
Yeah, we love to hear success stories. If anyone has anything they want to share, like Joe's.
We have a connecting people to nature success story. We worked for Furman fragrance manufacturer over on the Newark Bay, and they had the back part of their plant, which just ran into the bay, was just a nasty kind of marshy area. But we helped them, got rid of, as you said, Jason, get rid of the invasives, you know, plant natives, and put a walking trail and gazebo. And there's, you know, employees who are really in a rough manufacturing area, even a rough area all around them, and they just love going back there and cataloging all the things in nature that they see. So that's one of our favorite things to do.
That's great.
So you can do that.
You took an industrial area and you made it, you know, an amenity.
Yeah, it's the new amenity. That's the way to put it, I think, to the real estate folks out there, and you know, try and sell it as a new amenity. You know, you got your gym, you got your a great little cafe or whatever, have your outdoor nature area.
We're actually trying to set up on another meeting sometime in the near future concerning outdoor space and design. So we have one presenter that's going to talk about that, as well as we may incorporate it with a landscaper as well, so we can get the landscaper's perspective on all that. So it's something for the future, whether it's probably a June, July timeframe. We haven't kind of nailed it down just yet, but we're hoping to soon, right, Jackie? So yeah, it'll be a great presentation. To Mark's point, it's definitely it's something that geared towards is to get everyone out of the buildings. As much as we want them back in our buildings and working and being productive, we also want to have that element of them going outside and getting some fresh air. So,
Jason, I have a question for you.
Sure.
In the light of COVID and the things we've learned and the idea of how fragile we can be, I'm seeing and thinking that a lot of these huge campuses that were corporations are going to be less used. And are there many plans, like they did it with Bell Labs in Howell, to change completely the use of buildings and to look forward to either residential or some kind of green space instead of the corporate campus that was there? Is that something you think that'll be a prevalent?
I think you're going to see a lot of adaptive reuse starting to happen. I mean, we've already seen it with malls. You know, many big malls have been converted to condo apartment type complexes. They're well suited for it, actually, given the layout and the space. So what do you do with the corporate office park? The Bell Labs is a perfect example, you know, of potential adaptive reuse. But you know, one of the things, good, bad, or indifferent, that's come out of this is, I think in many ways people have realized a better quality of life by not having to spend so much time in the car, and realize that they don't have to be in the building as much. So will we still need office space? Yes. Will people still need to meet in person? Yes. Does it need to be every day, 9 to 5, 5 days a week? No. So, you know, companies that had 100,000 square feet may only need 50.
Right.
And then what happens to the other 50? Does that bring another company in?
That's the question.
Yeah, do they go to a smaller building and something else happens with that building? You know, I don't think we've seen, we haven't seen it, you know, sort of really hit yet, because people are still trying to figure out what they're going to do as far as coming back, how they're coming back, how much they're coming back, are they staying, are they going? But you're going to see bricks and mortar corporate office type environments, I think, as a result of this change. Not because they're afraid of COVID, but because they realize there's a better way to do business.
Exactly.
Well, and you know, it's a great question, Joe, because from an HR executive standpoint, the conversations I have are the hybrid workplace is going to be probably the go-to model. Will they be in the office 3 days a week and virtual 2 days? So I think you're going to see this blended approach where people come on site for meetings, in-person sociability, connection, ideation sessions. and then they do their work outside the office. So I think we're going to see that shift in the design of workplaces to me, maybe more of a hoteling where people will come and they won't have an assigned office anymore is another model that I'm hearing.
Yeah.
I can tell you that that's happening. You know, we're working with a very large client now on a corporate campus here in New Jersey that has a half a dozen 200,000+ square foot office buildings, which have basically been empty since COVID. And they decided during COVID to gut these buildings, completely renovate them from their 1990s to, you know, early 2000s plan layout, and go exactly in what you just said, Pam, to a hoteling situation where there are no assigned offices, there are no assigned seats. You know, they're putting in smart building technology so that you can schedule space and rooms for specific needs, for specific small group functions, without the 9-to-5 approach that we've seen before. And they're moving all of their buildings on this major campus to this approach.
Interesting. I by the way, I used to work in that Bell Labs building in Homedale, and it was not as attractive as it is today.
Yeah, I know. My wife
It was more like a prison.
Yeah.
And now it's beautiful. And it's an architectural, iconic building. It's spectacular, award-winning and everything, right? And it was like a drafty prison. little cells, very gray.
Yeah, that's the way it was. In that argument though, I have a little cynicism in me, because I think big corporations are really reluctant to take this on. Like Detroit used to be years ago. Well, we don't have to change our design. We're the best at what we do. And I think the evolution of thought in the corporate world isn't where we hope it is. And that's, I think, where FMs can actually push upward toward upper management and maybe help them understand why they should think newly.
That's a good point.
It's a great conversation, which is really points to what we're talking about, which is your leadership ability. And it's the up, down, across, and being able to influence your stakeholders and bring your strengths over your strategic approach. And some of the recommendations from today we hope will help you.
You know, I really think that the facility manager's biggest ally is the HR director.
Yeah.
You know, Pam, I could have sworn I read somewhere. I know initially when COVID kicked off, there was an increase of productivity. But lately I read somewhere where actually that productivity is starting to slide. So I think the fatigue of working from home is we're reaching that point there. So I think people gonna kind of still want to work from home, but not all the time. So to your point with the hybrid approach, I think that's probably going to be the wave of the future. And then to what Jason's point is, it's probably going to be more hoteling. It's gonna become more the forefront. So
well, that's the evolution. Yeah.
Interestingly, you know, on the architectural side of things, for me, residential renovation projects are booming right now because everybody's been in their house for the last year, and they've all realized how inadequate their house is to serve this kind of a purpose. These places weren't designed to work in from 9 to 5 and to do it with kids homeschooling and, you know, everything else on top of that. So, you know,
the facilities were inadequate for the current operations.
Right. So, you know, put your home FM hat on like Joe did. There's a lot of improvements to people's houses that we're
walk
spending
around
time
and just
on.
unplug everything.
Yeah, right. Homes are not always well buildings.
No.
Oh, interesting. Well, listen, I have to get going. I don't know about the rest of you, but thank you very much. It was a very good presentation. So
thanks all.
Everyone, Pam, Jason, can't thank you enough. I'm going to wrap it up too as well. I got my vaccination this morning, so I'm feeling a little,
all right,
ready to celebrate. No, I'm only kidding. But yeah, great to see everyone.
Coming out soon with we recorded this, so it'll we'll send that out to everyone. So because especially Pam and Jason, you had that the PowerPoint. So there's a couple points in there that I want to kind of scroll to and just kind of like reread it.
Yeah, it was very well presented.
So,
Thanks. But we are going to give you guys a little cheat sheet. We're going to take some excerpts from that and send you the PDFs of it, so you don't have to keep
wonderful.
scrolling back and forth on the video and hitting pause.
Even better. Even better. Thank you very much.
Okay, guys, I'm gone too.
All
See you
right.
later.
All right.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you,
Good night,
everyone.
everyone. Have a
Have a
great
good one.
great